Kevin Moore here from Timba.com with an introduction to Beyond Salsa Percussion Volume 3 on Calixto Oviedo and Timba Gears. In Cuba, rhythms are often learned by osmosis with a bare minimum of intellectual explanation. So in Volume 1 of this series, we used a special step-by-step audio method to learn to sing and clap all of the combinations of 1, 2, and 3 rhythms played by Latin timbaleros and drummers. In Volume 2, we use slow-motion video looping to study Calixto's creative approach to basic pre-timba Cuban genres such as danzón, cha-cha-cha, Mozambique, and pilón. So we started playing. Here in Volume 3, we'll use this same method to break timba and salsa down into families of grooves that we call gears. Here's an example of the most common gear change in salsa and timba, from Marcha abajo to Marcha arriba. As the timbalero switches from playing the sides of the timbales to the bell, the bongocero simultaneously switches from bongo to the handbell. This is what a gear change is, a choreographed change of instrument and/or pattern by one or more members of the rhythm section. The traditional salsa rhythm section is very clearly defined, playing almost exclusively in one or the other of the marcha gears and consisting of a conguero, a timbalero who plays cáscara in Marcha abajo, contra campana in Marcha arriba, and sometimes cymbal in Marcha de Mambo, and a bongocero who plays bongo in Marcha abajo and switches to a handbell for the other gears. Timba lives up to our title Beyond Salsa Percussion in various ways. Most importantly, it repeatedly and dramatically jumps between the worlds of traditional marcha accompaniments and exciting new timba gears like Presión, Masacote, and Bomba.
¡No hay vuelta!
So gears like Presión and Bomba produce these really dramatic and obvious differences between timba and salsa in terms of structure, content, dance, and overall emotional impact. But timba also differs from salsa within the Marcha gear family that the two genres share. To get a feel for this, let's take a typical chord progression in 2/3 clave and see how a salsa band and a timba band might play it in Marcha arriba gear. We'll use a track from Beyond Salsa for Ensemble to demonstrate how a timba rhythm section might approach this same groove. Now let's do an A-B comparison between salsa and timba Marcha arriba gears. Now let's listen to the groove in slow motion while we make some general observations about each part. Another key to understanding timba percussion lies in the aesthetic idea that each band should strive for a unique sello, or trademark style. While you can count on a salsa band using the holy trinity of conga, bongo, y timbal, every timba band seems to have a different approach, ranging from 2 to 5 percussionists dividing the responsibilities in a variety of ways. This chart assumes that percussionist number 1 is the conguero, the one player that can be found in every band. In the case of Los Van Van, there is no bongocero. The drummer sets up a timbales rig to the left of his drum set and mounts the bongocero's handbell so that both bells can be played by the same person at the same time in Marcha, arriba. The percussion setups of Charanga Habanera and Adalberto Alvarez are much closer to those of salsa, but note that even here it's still absolutely essential for the timbalero to play kick drum, even when playing from a standing position. The kick drum is rare in salsa, and if it is present, it's used only for color and reinforcement, not as part of any of the basic gears. But it's almost impossible to have timba without an independent kick drum part interacting and conversing with the bass and clave. Many timba bands have drum set, but all timba bands have a kick drum. Isaac Delgado and Climax use a separate seated drummer who plays the contracampana played by the timbalero in salsa, and a separate standing timbalero who plays clave on the jam block and a mounted version of the bongocero's handbell. In the cases of Paulito FG and La Banda, the drummer has a timbales rig to his left, just like Los Van Van, but these groups also have a dedicated bongocero, so the drummer/timbalero is only responsible for one of the bell parts. Pupi Pedroso's Los Que Son Son has yet another approach, with a standing timbalero responsible for all of the bells and the jam block, leaving the trap drummer, in this case Bombon Reyes, responsible for only the kick drum and freeing him to improvise expressively on the rest of the drum set. At the height of his fame in Cuba, Manolín, el médico de la salsa, was making so much money that he was able to hire a 5-man percussion section with separate players on drum set, timbales, bongo, congas, and guiro. At the other extreme, most timba bands in the United States seek to downsize as much as possible for financial reasons, so we often see just congas and one monster drummer responsible for all the bells, the jam block, and the kick. By now, the primary challenge of Volume 3 should be crystal clear. How can a trap drummer trained in rock or jazz, or a timbalero trained in salsa, songo, or charanga, go about making the transition to timba? If you're hired by a timba band playing cover songs, you have to understand the seos of the bands that recorded each song. And if your band is playing originals, you have to perform the tricky balancing act of staying close enough to the major timba bands to sound authentic, and yet different enough to give your band its own seo. You also have to be able to adjust to the equipment and skill sets of whatever combination of drummers your band employs, as well as knowing how to change your patterns on short notice when substitute musicians show up, as so often happens in the live music economy that currently exists outside of Cuba. Fortunately, Calixto Oviedo proved to be the ideal subject for a book that seeks to study the timba rhythm section as a whole rather than the seo of one specific group. Calixto was one of the first to combine drums and timbales in Grupo HRE in the early 1970s. He played drums and timbales with a bongocero with Pacho Alonso, Pachito Alonso, and La Banda, standing timbales with kick with Adalberto Alvarez and Afro-Cuban All-Stars, drums and timbales with only a conguero in his current group, and dozens of other combinations since leaving Cuba for Europe in 1997 and now in the United States. Finally, Calixto was the principal innovator and is arguably still the greatest Cuban proponent of a sublimely expressive North American instrument that's as perfect a fit for Cuban music as the kick drum has turned out to be, the hi-hat. The main body of the book is devoted to transcriptions of Calixto's many approaches to each gear and each common rhythm section configuration. The all-inclusive kit he used for the project is set up as follows: jam block, contracampana, cha bell, hi-hat, timbales, the mounted bongocero's handbell, and an extra cha bell which can serve the function of the heel of the handbell. In Chapter 1, Calixto gives us 18 ways to play Marcha abajo, on timbales, on just drum set, and on various combinations of the two. Among them we have the simplest traditional approach of playing cascareo with one hand and filling in the rest with the other. adding the hi-hat, adding the kick, leaving out the timbales entirely and playing on the drum set, playing the hi-hat from below, and, most common in timba today, cascareo plus rumba clave and kick. As explained in our Volume 2 video, based on your own personal learning style, you can choose between traditional DVD, pre-programmed video loops for computer, audio loops, and of course written notation. Chapter 2 is on Marcha, arriba, the gear that accounts for the largest percentage of nearly every salsa and timba arrangement. Depending on the instrumentation and seo of your band, you may be responsible for either or both of two interlocking bell patterns, the kick drum, the jam block clave, and the hi-hat. In Chapter 3, we transcribed 33 loops of Calixto's playing, including all of the basic approaches in their plain vanilla versions and Calixto's own controlled improvisations. Okay, here's a case for all you rhythm detectives out there to solve, based on Marcha Arriba number 6. As explained earlier, a timba percussion section can have from 2 to 5 members, and one of them is always the conguero. So if all you know is that the drummer is playing Marcha Arriba number 6, how can you use this fact to deduce the instruments of the other members of the rhythm section? Let's reason it out. Marcha Arriba number 6 has 3 parts: contracampaneo, rumba clave, and kick drum. What's missing is the pattern traditionally played on the bongocero's handbell. This could be played by either a bongocero or a timbalero on a mounted bell. But if it were a timbalero, he'd almost certainly play the clave on the jam block with his other hand. So the answer is that there are 3 percussionists, and the third is a bongocero with a handbell. Now let's play the same game with Marcha Arriba number 18. In this case, our drummer is playing kick, campaneo, a modified contracampaneo, and an optional hi-hat stomp. So, we can safely assume that we're dealing with either the cost-saving 2 percussionist setup favored outside Cuba, or that, as with Van Van or El Trabuco, the third percussionist is a full-time guiro player. Finally, let's look at Marcha Arriba number 21, one of Calixto's signature hi-hat grooves. He's again playing both bells, but he still manages to add the hi-hat splashes. is an endlessly fascinating word with multiple meanings and a controversial history that's explored in lurid detail in Beyond Salsa Bass Volume 2. Remember that our bass series doubles as a history course. Today, the word mambo is most commonly used for those ubiquitous horn riff sections that alternate with the lead and coro vocals of a typical salsa or timba arrangement. For the drummer/timbalero, Marcha de Mambo is the least standardized of the gears. A good mambo is a miniature composition that challenges a percussionist to come up with punches and fills that relate to the content of that particular mambo. Banda uses the very agile instrumentation of 2 trumpets and 2 saxes to execute the pyrotechnic and highly virtuosic mambos that have earned the NAH horn section the nickname Los Metales del Terror. With the vocalists usually laying out and blazing loud trumpets and saxes taking center stage, the drummer usually switches from bell to cymbal and plays a much freer, louder, and more bombastic style. Stretching the dynamics in the other direction, some NAH Banda mambos begin in a style called champola, where the horns layer in one by one contrapuntally, starting at a much lower volume level, sometimes even calling for a marcha abajo drum accompaniment. While NAH Banda's mambos are unmistakably original, the general approach of having horns without vocals and louder drumming with cymbals and aggressive percussion fills is quite common in timba and almost universal in salsa. But some timba bands, like Charanga Habanera, tend to favor an approach that looks back to Arsenio's original conception for the first horn riff sections, or diablos as he called them, in which the coros, lead vocals, and horn riffs are all intertwined. Some of the late 90s Charanga Habanera arrangements use the horns and vocals so freely that it becomes difficult to say at any one point whether they're playing a mambo or a coro section. In these cases, you're likely to continue playing straight Marcha Arriba even when the horns enter. So we have 2 key points here. First, mambo sections don't always use Marcha de Mambo gear. And second, as a drummer, your most important task is to think like an arranger and orchestrate your parts to fit musically with the horn writing. For Chapter 3, we asked Calixto to cycle back and forth between coro and mambo so we could study the transitions as well as the gears themselves. In our automotive analogy, Muela would be like applying the clutch or sliding the band's gear shift to neutral. Under the hood, the rhythm section's engine continues to idle and purr, but it feels like the band and the crowd are stopped at a red light with their windows rolled down, shooting the breeze, or as the name Muela implies, chewing the fat. Muela has no coros or horns, and the bass and percussion play as if they were in Marcha, but much softer and smoother. The pianist can play a mellow tumbao or simply play comping style. To get the sound of Muela into your ear, here's a short example from a live Isaac Delgado performance that we study in great detail in Volume 7 of both the piano and bass series. Having the band drop down to allow the singer to interact with the crowd is a common occurrence in nearly every type of live music, from country and western to the blues. It's part of the show, like a late-night comedian's monologue. But in Timba, Muela actually plays a structural role in the music. A rock, blues, or country singer might break the band down once or twice a night to introduce the band members, announce the next gig, or plug the t-shirts and CDs being sold after the show. But every Timba song has multiple coros, and most coros are introduced with either Muela or Presión. The singer breaks the band down and verbally explains the idea of the next coro, which is then taken up by the coristas and run through a cycle of gears and usually a mambo before another Muela cycle begins for the next coro. Porque Paro's next Muela is much longer because Isaac needs time to set up the idea of a dance contest and get the contestants to the stage. In the best Timba bands, the musicians, in this case pianist Melon Lewis and bassist Alain Perez, create special Muela patterns for these situations and fill them with some of their most interesting controlled improvisations. So you end up with the best of both worlds, an entertaining stage show with sophisticated rhythm section improvisations just below the surface.
Caballero, la chica con la cintura más loca de La Habana, le dicen especuladora. A ver si encuentro una, a ver si encuentro dos, a ver si encuentro tres, a ver, mora, tira aquí, a ver si es verdad. Mora, sube, ven, sube, mora, ven, sube, mora, vaya, una vista. Yo no te conozco de atrás, pero te conozco de chiquitica. A ver, ataca la melón, ¿qué dice? Especuladora, dice que tú tienes, dice que tú lloras. Especuladora, caballero, o goza la mora.
The Timba revolution of the 1990s ushered in dramatic innovations in many traditionally formulaic parts of the arrangement. Gears, piano and bass tumbaos, conga marchas, length and content of chord progressions, and instrumentation. Soon enough, muelas themselves, originally designed for interacting with live audiences, began to boast musical hooks crucial enough to be included in studio recordings like Paulito FG's Y San Toma Que.
Siempre hay alguien que nos debe, aunque sea una sonrisa. Si vemos que no se mueve, vamos todos a pedirla. ¿Qué te pasa? Te veo lento, éntrame con eso. Muévete ya con lo mío, que te pasaste de tiempo, de tiempo. ¿Qué te pasa? Te veo lento, éntrame con eso.
Or this glorious passage from El Gallo on Manolito's Después de Ti.
Aquí te vengo a cantar, porque como tú ninguna
But for perhaps the definitive example of the song-specific hook Muela, we need look no further than N.G. La Banda's Picadillo de Soya, in which El Tosco turns the special period's food shortage into an epic stand-up comedy routine over an unforgettable musical riff.
Señoras y señores, acaban de llegar el baile más superestelar de todos los tiempos. El picadillo de soya que tiene a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 puntos sobre la alimentación mundial. Y vitamina A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, R, S, P, Q, Z, W, W, vitamina W. La soya está loca, lo que tiene es candela. Ataca chicho, perucho.
So far we've covered Marcha abajo, Marcha arriba, Marcha de Mambo, and Muela, which we could also call Marcha de Muela. This Marcha family of gears is common to both timba and salsa, going beyond salsa only in style and instrumentation. But the timberos also came up with their own family of gears that differ from salsa in many important ways. The key to telling the difference between Marcha and Timba gears is to listen to the bass. If the bass is displaying a tumbao, it's a Marcha gear. And if the bass is displaying anything other than a tumbao, it's a timba gear. In traditional salsa, which only uses marcha gears, the bass tumbao never stops, and if it does, the dancers, singers, and other musicians will also stop. Then they'll look around in confusion, and then they'll kill the bass player. But in timba, the bassist can stop playing tumbao and play long, majestic pedal tones, funky thumps and slides, or lay out altogether, and this works in a timba context. In fact, it's the big moment that everyone waits for. When the bass tumbao drops out, it creates a massive surge of emotional energy because the percussionists also change their own parts in very specific ways, and the best dancers respond with dramatic changes of their own. How all these changes fit together determines which timba gear the music is shifted to, but unless the bassist stops playing tumbao, it's not a timba gear. When you hear the bass tumbao drop out, you know you're in a timba gear. But to know which timba gear you're in, you need to listen to the conguero. If the conga marcha also stops, it's Presión gear. Now, if the bass tumbao is out but the conga marcha is in, it could be Masacote or Bomba. Bomba has bass slides and heavy percussion, but ultimately the difference between the two gears lies in the way they make you feel. Masacote is funky, but retains a certain sense of control. If Masacote is funky but in control, Bomba is out of control in the absolute extreme. Think of Afro-Cuban folkloric music where the dancer becomes possessed or mounted. The following clip goes from Muela to Presión to either Masacote or Bomba. See if you can tell which by watching the bassist, conguero, and other percussionists.
¿Qué dice?
So that would be Bomba. The difference is of course subjective, and this is why it's almost impossible to get a Cuban bassist or dancer to demonstrate Bomba in an educational setting. They can only do it in the heat of battle. As the listener, it's only really Bomba for you if it carries you away, and the ability to do this in a very real sense is the true measure of a timba bassist or even a timba band. The Pedrito Martinez group, for example, is able to create a truly ferocious Bomba with just 4 players.
Así que mira muchachito, sí, sí, sí. Si te caigo mal. Yo no soy Superman, pero te olvidaré, porque yo soy un salvaje igual que el Pío Valdés. Yo no soy Superman, pero te olvidaré, porque yo soy un salvaje igual que el Pío Valdés. 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 ¿A dónde? Al machete. Al machete.
Timba Gears and Timba dance were quite literally made for each other, joined at the hip as it were. Most Cuban musicians credit the dancing public as their primary inspiration. As an example, when Orlando Fiol, Mike Gerald, and I were writing the Tomas Cruz conga method, we asked Tomasito about the origins of a new Masacote gear that Tomasito called Songo con Efectos, and that Paulito FG y su élite had added in the months after the release of Con la Conciencia Tranquila. Tomasito explained that the rhythm section would try out new ideas and watch the reactions of the dancers, searching by trial and error for rhythm section changes that would make the dancers change their own moves in exciting ways. It's an incredibly cool concept, but in practice, dancers apply it very loosely, and it's extremely frustrating to find video clips where the reality lives up to the seductive idea that dance and gears are 2 sides of the same coin. That said, there are some very specific dance moves that correspond beautifully to Marcha, Presión, and Bomba. They're not always used, and even when they are, they're not always applied right at the musical boundaries of the gears. But it's a sight to see when the planets align and 2 great dancers fully capture the cathartic rush of a timba gear change. Let's start our tour of Cuban dancing with Marcha. The dance connection is built right into the name. The dancers march, dancing the basic step in couples. In contrast, timba gears inspire the couple to separate and dance with their hips and shoulders more than with their feet. This sets up one of the most exhilarating aspects of Cuban dance, that electrifying moment when 2 master dancers come back together just as the band surges from breakdown back into marcha. Presión is the easiest gear dance connection to find examples of. The singer very frequently calls out mano para arriba, or hands in the air, which serves to separate the couples, and then the majestic sense of arrival that Presión brings with it does the rest of the work. Bomba and the more intense forms of Masacote have a deep connection to our final dance category, tembleque or despelote, which has its roots in Afro-Cuban folkloric music, not only in the types of dance gestures used, but in the idea that the dancer can enter a cathartic trance-like state in which the dance movements become involuntary. The last difference in our chart is one of Timba's most exciting breakthroughs, the liberation of the rhythm section from the sections of the arrangement. Up to this point, we've been looking at the details of the rhythm section at a microscopic level, but now we need to zoom all the way out and look at the overall form of a complete performance. To get a sense of the pre-Timba landscape, let's look at a typical generic salsa arrangement. There's usually a short instrumental introduction that's often reprised at the end as an outro. This is where the arranger has the most creative freedom, and depending on the character and volume of the music, it could use any of the Marcha gears. The cuerpo is essentially a popular song, with the spotlight fully on the lead singer, perfectly accompanied by the soft, inobtrusive Marcha abajo gear with no bells or cymbals. The cuerpo itself will break down into subsections, just like the verse, chorus, and bridge of a pop song. And in some cases, the arranger will create contrast by having the rhythm section switch in and out of Marcha arriba, especially if the cuerpo includes coros. After a short optional transition, the montuno section begins in Marcha arriba, with the coro section leaving holes for the lead singer to improvise or sing pre-composed phrases. When the horns come in for the mambo, the volume level goes up even further and the rhythm section switches to Marcha de Mambo. Coro too could come in at this point, but in our model arrangement we'll let the lead singer break it down to talk to the crowd, perhaps introducing a piano solo. Since the piano is a relatively soft solo instrument, the rhythm section switches to Marcha abajo. The pianist might end with a piano tumbao, signaling the rhythm section to go back to Marcha arriba for the next coro, which in turn is followed by another mambo, and so on. This is just one possible generic example. There are many permutations depending on the number of coros, mambos, solos, and interludes, but the key point here is that the gear changes are tied to arrangement sections. Some gears are even named after the arrangement sections they're meant to be used with. Marcha de Mambo accompanies Mambo, and Muela accompanies the jawing of the singer with the crowd. It seems completely obvious that the rhythm section accompaniments should change to fit the changes in the arrangement, but the timberos of the 90s had a bold stroke of genius. Why not change gears within a section of an arrangement? And why not come up with hand signals so that the singer or leader can call these changes as a football quarterback or basketball point guard would call a play? The result is a performance in which the arrangement sections and gear sections can change at different points, and, if the hand signal approach is used, in which the same band can play the same song with a different form from night to night. Jazz improvisation involves improvising within a predetermined form, and controlled improvisation in timba involves improvising within a predetermined tumbao or groove. But gear changes open up the bold new possibility of improvising the form itself. Presión gear has 3 requirements: the absence of a bass tumbao, the absence of a conga marcha, and most importantly, a powerful sense of arrival. As with Bomba, the true measure of a timba band is how powerful your reaction is. The ultimate Presión section should make you feel like you're gazing out of the space shuttle at planet Earth. If it just sounds like a breakdown and doesn't move you in some way, it's Muela, at least for you. This is one reason why you can't count on watching the dancers to determine what gear you're in. Even great dancers, if they're not feeling it at that moment, will dance right through a gear change. How you approach Presión gear on drums and/or timbales, as always, depends on the sello and the instrumentation of your band. The most common components are jam block clave and kick drum, and if there's a trap drummer, hi-hat.
La soya es un alimento, se utiliza de 1000 maneras, con la carne de pescado y la carne de ternera se prepara.
With la Banda, Calixto usually played hi-hat and kick, but he also shows us some clave variations among the 19 patterns in our Presión chapter. The key element for Bomba gear is the sliding, thumping bass, but again, it's the emotional rush that really defines the gear. For the drummer, Bomba is like Marcha de Mambo on steroids, but heavier on groove, with less of the song-specific orchestrations of the horn parts. Looking ahead, Beyond Salsa for Ensemble Volume 1 is a massive study of the rhythm section breaks or efectos that are added to marcha sections already in progress, another key element of the timba style. We write out all the parts for every member of the rhythm section. The last part of the book contains a complete, very detailed chart of a Pupi Pedroso song, with horns, vocal harmonies, and piano and bass parts written out note for note. Beyond Salsa for Ensemble Volume 2, currently being written, is devoted to gears from the point of view of the entire rhythm section.
Calixto Oviedo, ¿cómo hacer? ¡Perucho!
La soya es un alimento, se utiliza de 1000 maneras, con la carne de pescado y la carne de ternera. Se prepara calientita, con pimienta y con ají. ¡Oh! Y a mí me han enseñado, y yo te lo enseño aquí. Dice Villar con la receta, porque tiene vitamina
Y la cocinaron Julia Dolores y Gary Juana Cristina. Oye, me dijeron que en Japón a las mujeres les sirvieron el picadillo de soya. Ay, que se comieron, como lo cocinan los el picadillo de